Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tera Vanachari. Jamuna Tera Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tera Vanachari. Jamuna Tera Vanachari. Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Asto Saraswati Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Ki Nitai Gora Prevedadi Namo Vishwadaya Krishna Stabila Smati Purijam Prabhupada Namaya Namo Vishwadaya Krishna Stabila Smati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Picharni Nivasesha Sunyavadi Paschachati Satarane Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudev. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya. Reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 12, Vritrasura's Glorious Death, text number 13. Ayu Shri Kirtir Aishvaryam Asisha Purushasya Bhavanteva hi tatkale yatanichur uparyayaha Ayu Shri Kirti Aishvaryam Ashisha Purushasya Bhavanteva hi tatkale Yatanichur viparyayaha Ayu Shri Kirti Aishvaryam Ashisha Purushasya Yaha Bhavancheva hitatkale Yatani chor viparyayaha Ayu Shri Kirti Aishvaryam Ashisha Purushasya Yaha Bhavanteva hitatkale Yatani chor viparyayaha Ayu Shri Kirti Aishvaryam Ashisha Purushasya Yaha Bhavancheva hitatkale Yatani churvaparyayaha. Ladies. Ayu Shri Kirti Aishvaryam Ashisha Purushasya Yaha Bhavancheva hitatkale Yatani chor viparyayaha Ayu Shri Kirti Aishvaryam Ashisha Purushasya Yaha Bhavancheva hitatkale Yatani chor viparyayaha Ayu Shri Kirti Aishvaryam Ashisha Purushasya Yaha Bhavancheva hitatkale Yatani chor viparyayaha Ayu longevity Shri opulence Kirti fame Aishvaryam power Ashishaha benedictions Purushasya of the living entity Yaha which Bhavanti arise Eva indeed he certainly Tatkale at that proper time Yata just as Anichaho of one not desiring Viparyayaha reverse conditions. Just as a person not inclined to die must nonetheless give up his longevity, opulence, fame and everything else at the time of death, so at the appointed time of victory one can gain all these when the Supreme Lord awards them by His mercy. Tweedja, could you get some tissues for me, please? Or a tissue or two. Yeah. Purport, it is not good to be falsely puffed up, saying that by one's own effort one has become opulent, learned, beautiful, and so on. All such good fortune is achieved through the mercy of the Lord. From another point of view, no one wants to die and no one wants to be poor or ugly. Therefore, why does a living entity, against his will, receive such unwanted troubles? It is due to the mercy or chastisement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that one gains or loses everything material. No one is independent. Everyone is dependent on the mercy or chastisement of the Supreme Lord. There is a common saying in Bengal that the Lord has 10 hands. This means that he has control everywhere, in the 8 directions and up and down. If he wants to take everything away from us with his hands, with his 10 hands, we cannot protect anything with our 2 hands. Similarly, if he wants to bestow benedictions upon us with his 10 hands, we cannot factually receive them all with our 2 hands. In other words, the benedictions exceed our ambitions. The conclusion is that even though we do not wish to be separated from our possessions, sometimes the Lord forcibly takes them from us. And sometimes he showers such benedictions upon us that we are unable to receive them all. Therefore, either in opulence or in distress, we are not independent. Everything is dependent on the sweet will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmaye Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahayam Dadati Svapadantikam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Sri Gurum Dinatavinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishvaram. In a nutshell, God gives and God takes away. Thank you. Maybe give me another one of these. These are the really small, thin, cheap models. So they don't, not very effective. You know, when you buy cheap tissues, you end up using twice as much. So what's the point? Right. So, Vritrasura has a very deep understanding of and appreciation of the workings of the material energy. Under and that the material energy is working under the direction of the Lord. What is it? Ishvaraha Savabhutanam Riddesharjuna Tishtati. That the Lord is situated within the heart of everybody. And Brahmayan Savabhutanam Yantra Rudhani Mayaya. That he's directing the wanderings of all of the living entities who are situated as if on a machine made of the material energy, which is Krishna's Maya, if you like, Mayaya. And the workings of that machine are directed by the Paramatma, the Supreme, the Super Soul. Ishvaraha, Parama Krishna. Well, he's the Supreme controller. So, whatever happens is under his jurisdiction, under his direction, under his control. He doesn't directly do things. The material energy does that for him, but the material energy acts under his direction. There's an example in the Brahma Samhita that comes to mind. Just like your shadow moves according to the movement of the body, right? So similarly also, Maya moves like Krishna's shadow, right? And so there's a connection. There's a connection. So, or another saying, man proposes, God disposes, right? We have so many desires and aspirations. And as is mentioned here, nobody wants to die. Nobody wants to have their life shortened, their opulence decreased, their fame sullied, if you like, and their power minimized. Nobody wants these things. Yet, it happens. And so the point here that Vritrasura is making is that everything at the time of death will be taken away, and ultimately that's happening under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And you know, for the faithless, God appears in the form of what? Death. Then all of a sudden everybody becomes very religious, right? They all become very religious because death is such an immediate challenge. And this is a challenge. Everything's gone. Poof. We're born into the world and we're given so much facility and we think we're in charge and in control. But then when death comes, it's all gone. And, you know, this is why they say there are no atheists on the battlefield. Right?
No atheists in foxholes.
What's that?
No atheists in foxholes.
That's right, no atheists in the foxholes. Because at any moment you could be blown up. So there's prayer, I guess. So this all depends. Well, first of all, there's a certain degree of karma, but again, that's being awarded under the jurisdiction, under the direction of the Upadrashta Anumantacha, right? The overseer and the permitter. Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita how the supersoul works. And he's able to see the desires, and so he awards what we desire, but according to what we deserve, which will be determined by our past activities, our karma. Whether it's been karma, vikarma, or even akarma, right? Karma being positive action or action that's in pursuance of laws of nature, that which is positive, and then there's vikarma, that which will give a negative reaction. It's bad karma, basically. We have good karma and bad karma. And then akarma, those activities which are actually beyond karma. There's no reaction, neither good nor bad. Those activities are on the spiritual platform, which is what Bhakti Yoga is focused on. The performance of activities that are done purely for the benefit of oneself, the spiritual self, for the benefit of others, on the spiritual platform, and also for the benefit of Krishna. Shilanam. Shila means pure activities or uncontaminated activities. Krishna Anushilanam, described by Rupa Goswami. Activities that are pleasing ultimately to Krishna, and therefore then also pleasing to oneself and pleasing to all others. Satisfying, right? Satisfying. And this may not be on the material platform. This is on the spiritual platform. And so sometimes the devotees embrace activities which are inherently difficult. But even though there's challenges and difficulties in those activities, knowing that they're pleasing the spiritual master, knowing that they're satisfying to Krishna, knowing that they're pleasing the devotees, then a devotee is happy to embrace challenges or difficulties. Right? And also in this mood, this was in the previous verse, Vritrasura was saying, the success of what we do is dependent on the Lord. And of course the devotee's measure of success is not based on, what have we got here? Ayu Shri Kirtir Aishvaryam. Long life, opulence, fame, and power. Right? Things that people work very hard for. Right? Devotees not so concerned about these things. They come and they go. Ayu Shri Kirtir Aishvaryam. Ashishaha. Benedictions. These are all benedictions. This is considered to be good karma. Bad karma is, well, when you die, certainly. And opulence. When our opulence is decreased, we become unhappy. When people criticize us, we become depressed, disturbed. Huh? We even might take them to court. You defamed me. You said this about me and it's not true. Huh? When they're saying you're such a good person, and but that's not true, you don't mind, right? But then if somebody says something about you that's bad, that's not true, then you get really upset. If people are praising you, we're happy. Oh, it's okay. Even if there's slight discrepancies. Right? And power. Because I'm thinking about that, the ex-Prime Minister of Japan. He's a famous, influential person in Japan, in a country, which is generally peaceful. There's people are not allowed to own guns, practically speaking, a bit like Australia. But everything just taken away so quickly. And so, devotees see in that the hand of Behind everything is the super soul. So Prabhupada gives the example of Lord Vishnu. He has 10 hands. And so when Lord Vishnu wants to take something away from you, you can only but surrender. Well, you've got 2 hands, he's got 10. He can take everything away in a moment. And conversely, if he's giving, what can we accept with 2 hands when he's giving with 10? And we can see that. Often a devotee will perform austerities, especially in preaching, and not apparently be making any progress. But then when there's success, there's great success, and Krishna gives more than the devotee can manage. Srila Prabhupada used to, he had a friend in Calcutta whose daughter became Prabhupada's disciple. I forgot what her name is, but she mentions how when Srila Prabhupada would visit Calcutta, he would visit her father, and then he would tell her father, and this is in the early 70s, he would tell her father, it's all got out of control. I can't manage it. It's too big. Right? When you think about it, Prabhupada was managing ISKCON, rarely using a telephone, and there was no internet or virtual communications, and he was answering all of his disciples' requests by letter, by direct mail, effectively, right? And the movement was, it had become 10 temples, but then very quickly became 50 and 60 and 70, and then. So many, many years Prabhupada had nothing. But then when success came, then it was like a torrent, an avalanche. or we read in that book, Hare Krishna explosion. Right? It was. So, as Prabhupada says here, he has control everywhere. If he wants to take everything away, we cannot protect anything. If he wants to bestow benedictions, we cannot factually receive them all. So this is a fact. A fact of life is that we will have to eventually face the fact that we'll be separated from our possessions at some point in time. Usually at the time of death, or absolutely at the time of death, but at other times too. Krishna will take everything away. But sometimes he takes away just to test the devotee. Sometimes he takes away to test. And in the Bhagavatam it's mentioned this is a great mercy of Krishna on the devotee. Because, sometimes we think, oh, Krishna, you're taking everything away, it's not fair. But actually, it's Krishna's kindness to teach us dependency, right? To teach us, it's part of sharanam, surrender, right? Krishna takes away. But then and we see this in Prabhupada's example, Prabhupada lived very, but then he'll give when he sees that the devotee is capable of accepting opulent, what have we got here again? Ayu Shri Kirtan Aishvaryam. When a devotee is capable of accepting these benedictions, if you like, these gifts, but uses them in Krishna's service, then Krishna will bestow all of these items when a devotee is pure-hearted. And he understands. Krishna gives, Krishna takes away. Whatever I have, I'll use in Krishna's service. And so, sometimes a devotee is given great opulence because Krishna sees that devotee is able to use the opulence in service. Right? Prabhupada, the devotees told Prabhupada about the Mayavadi sannyasi who had the picture of, he would be given money and he'd just reject it, right? Showing his renunciation. And Prabhupada said, you can take a picture of me and give me the money. Give me the money, right? But his taking the money is not for himself. Prabhupada lived very simply. Every temple that Prabhupada went to, he would be given gifts, right? Then the next temple he'd go to, he'd give those gifts to the devotees. So, this understanding of Vritrasura is actually, the mood of a devotee is, I get these things, they're taken away, this is the nature of the material world. This coming and going. But the real proprietor, real renunciation, is to understand that these objects of these desirable objects ultimately are Krishna's property. What is it? Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatam jagat tena chaktena bunjita magridha kasyasviddanam. That everything animate and inanimate within the creation is owned and controlled by the Supreme Person. And a wise person knows that each of us has a certain quota set aside for us that we can use. And with that mood, with that understanding, one can accept anything. Opulence, power, influence, fame, longevity, these things can be accepted with the understanding that they're gifts ultimately. The facility that we have is given to us by Krishna, and we should learn to use it in that spirit, in that mood. And it's appropriate, it's proper for us to accept that as our own also. We can say it's mine, right? But we say, it's mine in the sense that it's been provided by Krishna to use in his service. And that sense of proprietorship is in a mood of a conservator or a what's the word? Dominion. One can have dominion or control over these things when one understands that they're ultimately belonging to Krishna. Does that make sense? Yeah. So then when they're given to us, we can use them. When they're taken away, we can't use them. So, there's that story where Srila Prabhupada had his Bhagavad Gita stolen. Prabhupada wrote the Bhagavad Gita at least 2 times. And the first time he had his manuscript that he brought from India, and it was stolen in New York. Right? Huh?
Like everything else.
Yeah, typewriter, this, everything. Prabhupada had his... And Prabhupada said, more or less, Krishna gives and Krishna takes away. Huh? So he had to rewrite the Bhagavad Gita. No small feat. Right? I guess it would have been easier second time round. And perhaps even better in one sense. So, when Krishna takes away from the devotee, then this is considered to be a benediction. And when Krishna gives, then that's also a benediction. Not for our personal enjoyment, but rather it gives us an opportunity to render more, to do more service. It gives us more facility to serve. So that's the context of the mood of a devotee. So Prabhupada says here, the conclusion is that even though we do not wish to be separated from our possessions, sometimes the Lord forcibly takes them from us. And sometimes He showers such benedictions upon us that we are unable to receive them all. And then Prabhupada gives the conclusion. Therefore, we're not independent. We're never independent. Everything is dependent upon the will of Krishna, ultimately. Okay, does anybody have any comments or questions on any of these points?
Thank you for the class, Prabhu. So I'm just wondering when these 4 opulences, so to speak, a devotee gets. Sometimes the knowledge may not come right away, that how to use it in Krishna's sense.
Yeah.
So how important is to seek guidance?
How important is?
To seek guidance from the senior devotees, senior Vaishnavas, to engage that in Krishna's sense.
How important is, say that slowly,
Seek the guidance.
is to?
Seek the guidance from the senior devotees.
Oh, seek. Did you say seek? Seek guidance.
And sometimes we may not like what we're told. So how do we overcome that?
We might not like what?
What we've been advised by the seniors.
Oh, advice. Right. What if you don't like good advice? That's not unusual. Right? Common sense is hardly common. Seems to be a dearth of it. Okay. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. How important is advice, and what happens if we don't like the advice that we get? Yeah, learn the hard way, I suppose. Why not?
What happens when you don't wear shoes walking across class? It's the same thing will happen.
You get cut feet. Yeah. Well, Krishna does mention Tesham Satata Yuktanam Bhajyatam Pritipurvakam Tadame Buddhi Yogam Tam. yena mam upayanti te. So we can take advantage of, seniors and well-wishers and take their good advice. We can hear the Bhagavad Gita, we can hear the Bhagavatam. That's one of the reasons why we come together regularly to hear, is so that we can fine-tune our intelligence. And so association is considered most important, right? Sadhu Sangha Sava Shastra Koi. Sadhu Sangha, what is it? Labha Mata. Sadhu Sangha Sava Siddhi Hoi. Even just a moment's association with a devotee can give us all perfection. So it's recommended that we stay in the association of the devotees, even if we don't like their good advice. We have to hear it maybe more than once, right? We'll hear from the Bhagavatam, we'll hear from the Bhagavad Gita, we'll hear from the... And we'll see the example set by the devotees. So even if we don't like the advice, best to stay in the association of the devotees. And we'll keep on hearing it. And Krishna, within the heart, will reveal these things to us. He'll give us the intelligence to discriminate between what is good and bad advice, or that we should accept the good advice even if we don't appreciate it fully, right? So association is important. We should stay in that association. We should regularly hear, and that way then our discrimination will become purified. So it's a process of sublimation, of purification. Yeah. So it's okay. If you don't like it, it's all right. You'll hear it again tomorrow until you wake up. Right? Yeah. We were discussing the other day what happens when we have an inquisitive student who can't understand a topic. Right? You know. Huh?
It's a blessing.
They can't understand?
Yeah.
Well, Prabhupada recommends, if you can't understand something, read it again. Right? Keep reading it until you actually understand it. Right? Sometimes an individual, and the tendency of the student will put the responsibility or the blame on the teacher. You didn't explain it well enough. But you should also appreciate that sometimes students are a bit thick, right? They need to be purified. And so the teacher could give 20 rational, reasonable explanations of something, and the student still doesn't understand it. That's not the fault of the teacher, right? It may also be just the obtuseness of the student. They're not ready, and especially in devotional life, they're not ready to. They don't have the adhikar, the qualification to understand something at this point in time. Right? So at a certain point in your devotional career, I could come and tell you something, do this, do that, do the other thing. And you may not do it because you're not ready to hear that. Here's an example. Prabhupada was travelling to Calcutta? He was travelling somewhere, and they stopped in New Delhi. Just stopped. The devotees were travelling with Prabhupada, and the train stopped at New Delhi and was there for some time. And Prabhupada called, I think it was Bhanu Swami and one other devotee, and he said to them, I want you to stop here in New Delhi and open up a temple. So what? Now, if I told you to do that, right, go to Ballarat and open up a temple, for example, would you do it? You don't know. We could try if you like, see what happens. Right? So, I mean, that's not about understanding, that's about accepting the instruction of the spiritual master, right? But being able to, those devotees were deeply dedicated to Srila Prabhupada, so they got off the train. They were on the train expecting to be travelling with Prabhupada and attending the next preaching program or whatever. But much to their surprise, they found themselves in New Delhi. And they didn't have a place to stay, didn't have any money. Well, imagine that. 1 minute you're on the train in ecstasy travelling with your guru. The next minute you're off the train with nothing and a tall order. Right? It took some time for the devotees to establish a temple in Delhi. Those devotees weren't immediately obviously successful. The success for them was to execute the order of the spiritual master. That was enough. That was success. So, it may be, very often is, that a person, an individual, is not ready to accept or understand, is incapable of understanding spiritual topics, right? Maybe, or quite often is, right? And so therefore, we're tolerant. You know, we instruct people, we give them instructions, give them the holy name, give them books, but they may not be ready to receive it immediately.
Can we understand that understanding knowledge, the new realization, is based on the qualification of the person, or the knowledge is revealed?
The teacher the ability of the person to hear, right? Is that right? And their ability, you know, you can talk to a dog. Here's an example. You can give instructions to a dog. Have you tried that? And the dog will just sit there, right? He'll be enthusiastic and happy. But, you know, what does it understand? What does it understand? Nothing, right? Or, you know, what does a dog understand? Huh? Very basic instructions. You know, we've got a dog at the farm, Bronte, right? Bronte sleeps while we're eating the sabjis, right? But then when the sweets come out, Bronte wakes up and looks at us, you know, give me some sweets. In fact, when Bronte sees us drive up, usually on a Wednesday, she gets super excited because she knows it's the Ginger Rupa's sweets. Right? So, you know, dogs do have the capacity to know. They can understand a certain level of knowledge, right? But we don't give philosophy to a dog. Even though the information is powerful, right? You're not the body, you're a spirit soul, right? We could tell that to a dog. But, you know, Prabhupada says, you know, the dog is licking your face to see what you're going to taste like. So, the quality of knowledge may not be, or the quality of knowledge and the ability of the recipient or the ability of the person to receive that knowledge will depend on the piety of that individual, right? And the piety means the sukriti, certainly for devotional service, bhajanamukhi sukriti, which means the performance of previous devotional activities that have purified the consciousness of that individual so that they can receive that knowledge, right? It's dependent on previous pious activities, but pious activities from a devotional perspective, not necessarily pious activities that will give wealth or fame or these things, right? So the quality of the information may not determine the ability of the candidate to receive it. The potency of the person delivering that information may well do, right? May have an impact. So there are various factors at play. There's the qualification of the recipient, the potency of the person who delivers it, and also the quality, I guess, of the information that's given. How does that sound? Just as an analysis. Any other comments? Shibya. Mm. What was that last bit? Sometimes? Yep. We see something that we need. Yes. But something we need but we don't have. Yep. Like what? Video games. You don't have video games, do you? Huh? Okay, all right, so what are we going to do with the video games if we can't use them in Krishna's service? What are we going to do with them? Okay. Let's put them in a cupboard for a week and see what happens. See how long they stay in the cupboard. Oh, this is a dilemma. What to do with the video games? There's probably a good argument that video games are a waste of time. What do you think? Yeah. Yeah, they probably are. Yeah. So what do you do with them? What are we going to do with the video games? Mum, what are we going to do with the video games? I would suggest put them in a cupboard high up so the kids can't get them and see how long they last.
They don't really play. She wanted to ask about the toys.
Right.
We have so many toys that we can't use them for service.
Oh, but look, there's an argument. You could some recreational activities for children is fine because they're learning motor skills, intellectual Look, there are some arguments that playing games is not entirely useless because there are motor and intellectual, mental skills being exercised, right? That's why we go to school, to learn how to do things. So play for children is, you could say, is service, right? Children's service is to play, right? What do you reckon? Good idea? Yeah, you've got to have some fun in life. Otherwise, even and what does Krishna say? Yukta hara viharasya, yukta kama sachetasu, yukta swapna vabodhasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. There needs to be a balance. Although if we look at the example of Prahlad Maharaj, then we see a very, mature devotee at the age of 5 or something, very young. So it depends on the individual. I'll leave it up to you, Shibi, you can work it out. Okay? And we won't look down upon you just because you're playing a few games. Otherwise, we can have the games police. Right? Nope, no games. You'll be punished if you're playing games. You're wasting time. So, there has to, see, Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita that repression won't achieve anything if there's the inclination to do something. The inclination to render service, the desire, the desire to render service and the satisfaction that comes from it will mean that we're automatically engaged in Krishna's service. And we won't think about all the other things. That's what will happen naturally. So if you can develop, this is the most practical thing, develop a taste for devotional activities, and then automatically the other things will you'll forget about it. That's natural. Jade?
We hear that Krishna can take things away from us, or everything away from us for our own benefit. In those extreme cases where we see someone go through like a loss,
Yeah.
and we know that it's ultimately, that's what Krishna's mercy is. What can we do to kind of help them realize that this is a really great impetus for Krishna? Or should we leave that for Krishna? Even then, a non-devotee that's kind of favorable to.
Well, it depends on the level of intimacy or the level of friendship, right? And also our ability to connect and communicate. If somebody's going through loss and grief as a result of that loss, it's sometimes the devotee will just say, "That's your karma, you deserve it," right? And that's little comfort for anybody, right? Insensitive, right? Insensitive. So, sure, that's true, but we also need to be sensitive to the emotional distress, to a person's distress, and so that that distress needs to be explored, right? And it depends, it really depends on the relationship and that ability actually to listen, to hear first. That's the most important. And then, have you heard of a thing called empathy? Right? You may have heard of it, but being able to practice it, right? So somebody's having a loss, extreme loss, the ability to empathise is important, right? Rather than just being a cold-hearted, just a logician, or not what's the word? Unsympathetic, right? Cold heart, it's your karma, you deserve it. Suck it up, right? You're just a sinful. You're sinful karma. You're just getting your reactions. You deserve it, right? So, be sympathetic, and then ask the right questions. Right? How do you feel? Right? How do you think this came about? Why do you think this is happening? What's behind it? Is there a lesson can be learnt from this? Is there? Or are we unable to learn any lessons from these situations? And again, all of this depends on the relationship that you have with the person, right? Whether you can even ask these kind of questions. So, generally speaking, rather than, what devotees often will do is become preachers. Right? Whereas it's better to inquire first, to plumb the depths of the situation and plumb the consciousness of the individual. And sometimes it's better not to tell anything because the person's not inquisitive. They don't want to know, right? So what's the point of telling somebody that, like I said before, it's like giving spiritual instruction to a dog. What's the point? Right? And we have, what's the ninth offence in chanting Hare Krishna? Is it ninth? Or is it the 8th? What is it? 9th. What number is it, Krishna? 9. Okay, good. Yeah. And also in the Bible, there's a recommendation, don't cast pearl before the swine, lest they tread them in the dirt. It's a bit graphic, but it's what it means. Don't give spiritual instructions to people who are not capable of hearing them, because they can't hold them, they can't receive them. You've just wasted your time, and they may be critical of what you tell them. So Prabhupada recommends give them a book. Then later on they might look at it, right? And then in a moment of inquiry, I wonder what's in that. Let's have a look. So they're inquiring, right? So Prabhupada recommends Prabhupada says, what will your preaching do? Especially if the person's not inquisitive. Right? So inquiry is required before we instruct for it to be really effective. And so therefore we see in 434 tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena. So the person has to be respectful of the speaker and inquisitive, inquiring with that respect, and not a challenging inquiry. Right? If somebody's challenging, then just ignore them. Right? I remember when I was flying to LA, my first flight to LA, and I got up and I was walking around the cabin, 4 or 5 hours into the flight. And this guy who'd obviously had too much to drink wanted to get up and say, hey, what do you do? I said, take it easy, mate. I didn't come here to preach to you. You don't give me a hard time. Just wanted an argument. So I said, no thanks. And I knew he was drunk anyway. So what would be the point? But sometimes devotees want to defeat everybody philosophically. And Prabhupada says, I was just reading yesterday, I'm glad to hear that you're reading my books, and your ability, I'm paraphrasing here, but your ability to defeat all comers will increase your potency to preach, right? And sometimes devotees read Prabhupada's books and then they want to go and defeat everybody. But better that we hear, that we listen for the opportunities to give good advice, right? And if there's no inquiry, then we keep it to ourselves. Or we ask questions to help the person resolve issues or to, settle things down in their mind, right? That way then we can tell whether they're, whether they're suitably inclined or capable of receiving information if they want it, if they're Okay, anything else? I think we should finish here. Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vritsasura Prabhu ki jai.